The Tea Party unveils its new budget. Is this the solution to America's fiscal problems? I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for Front Page. All right, joining me in studio, Don Watkins of the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights and Terry Jones, Associate Editor for Investors Business Daily. All right, guys, the Tea Party budget balances the budget in 4 years without tax hikes, reduces spending by $9.7 trillion over the next 10 years, shrinks the federal government from 24% of GDP to 16%. Wow. Oh, music to everyone's ears, right? Terry, how does the budget accomplish these goals, and are these good goals?
Likey. It does it by getting rid of several unnecessary departments like energy, education, commerce, HUD, gets rid of all those. It curbs spending, as you mentioned, it caps spending so that spending ultimately doesn't go too high. And the main thing it does, I think, is that it brings us back to a notion of limited government and respect for the constitutional limits that are imposed on government. And over 10 years, there is absolutely no question this would be a major success in bringing us back to fiscal responsibility. It would take us from 24% of GDP in spending to about 16% of GDP in spending, which is where it was for most of the post-World War II era. And that's what we need right now. We need a restoration of some common sense and balance and notion of constitutional limits and personal responsibility.
Don, what do you think?
I mean, my favorite thing about it, certainly it's a step in the right direction, but what it does is it reintroduces the A word, abolish. The fact is, when's the last time in this country we've abolished anything? It's been a really long time, and yet if you really want to limit government and revive the economy in the process, it is not just cutting or trimming these programs, but abolishing so many of them that has to be done. And to start to get the public used to that again, to start getting momentum behind what can we eliminate, that's
spending,
great.
A spending cut means that if you're spending X, that next year you spend less than X. Yeah. It's been decades since that has occurred because of baseline spending. Like whatever is the current year is kind of zero. And then they just constantly are increasing it. So when we talk about cuts, we're only talking about the cut in the reduction of increase.
That's right.
Which is why we're in such an insane position.
One of the most evil concepts ever created was the notion of baseline spending, that anything that reduces spending from below what you have established as the baseline is somehow a cut. Even if it increases by 30%, it's a cut.
Now, but let's look at the departments of energy, education, commerce, housing, and urban development. Anything there that is being done, that's of value.
The only thing that might be done is under the Energy Department, we still have atomic energy, basically the remnants of the old Atomic Energy Commission, but that could be done by the Defense Department as it used to be before there was an Energy Department created. So that to me would be
regulating the safety of nuclear power plants, stuff like that, where there's a role for that. And probably most people would say like, yeah, I would like our nuclear power plants to be
a reasonable regulatory role there. But when you're talking about education, no. Commerce, don't need it. HUD, please. None of this stuff has been of any benefit whatsoever to the American people, and it just wastes massive amounts of money.
All right, FreedomWorks, the sponsor of the Tea Party budget, had Senator Mike Lee of Utah reserve them a room in the Senate building for the hearing, but then minutes before the event was supposed to start, Harry Reid, the exciting and charismatic Harry Reid, and the Senate Rules Committee kicked all 200 attendees out. It's petty, isn't it? Don, what do you think of this sort of gamesmanship in Congress? Because the courage and the will of Congress to actually do anything about a budget like this is really the biggest problem.
Yeah, I mean, so these are the people that think you should be able to occupy Wall Street and occupy LA, but you can't reserve
you can't occupy
a room
the actual legislative
to actually
buildings.
Advocate. Yeah, to advocate for anything that would stop them from continuing to decimate the economy and decimate our freedom.
Terry, the Democrats haven't passed a budget in the Senate, I guess. Does it start in the Senate, or is it just did it start in the House? Anyway, there's 900 days that have gone by. I mean, like the siege of Leningrad was a shorter pain, in shorter duration than since the last time they've passed a budget, which is a constitutionally mandated activity.
That's it. We're getting close to 1,000 days now. 1,000 days.
And there's no reason other than just politics. They don't want to admit they are who they are.
Pure raw politics. Because if they do it and they pass a budget and everybody sees that it has $1.5 trillion hole in it, they're going to be really, really mad. So they're not doing it, and they don't want to tell people, well, we would like to get rid of that deficit, but the way we'd like to do it is by taxing the bejesus out of you. And they don't want to do that either. So they've taken the coward's route, and yet the media picks this line of talk up and pretends that it's GOP obstructionism that has prevented a budget from being passed. That is a laughable joke.
For 2 years, they had control of all three branches.
For 2 years, they had control of
with
everything.
a supermajority.
And in the last year, the Republicans have only controlled one third of. Yeah.
All right. On a related note, in a recent report, Wharton real estate finance professor Joseph Gyurko asked the question, is the FHA the next housing bubble? He claims that although the FHA has increased its loan exposure to more than $1 trillion this year, from $305 billion at the end of 2007, they have not increased their capital reserves. In response, an FHA representative called the report's claims outrageous. Well, that doesn't mean they're false. Outrageous can mean lots of things, right? Yeah. We have fairly outrageous conditions of existence all over the place. So, Terry, tell us what the FHA does, what its role is, and what this report is shedding light on.
Well, I mean, like others, they're basically in the insurance, the mortgage insurance business, and they're basically helping to insure a lot of these mortgages. But look, anytime a federal official in any one of these major housing agencies or any other agency starts making claims that they don't need to recognize fiscal reality, things like tripling your exposure but not your capital set aside for the risk of that exposure. It's just insane. But they can get away with that and not be brought up on fraud charges, apparently, because they're government officials, and the rest of us have to live by the rules that everyone else lives by.
Don, I mean, these government-sponsored entities are sort of a real source of trouble. Any thoughts you have on the FHA, which, I mean, is barely distinguishable from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the FHA and all these organizations? They do nothing but seem to screw up to the things that they're supposed to manage.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't remember which of the Bill of Rights was it where it was, you have a right to a house with the government's aid. I mean, this is not a role for government. The government has nothing to say about housing. Its function, and this is, we're a broken record here, but it needs to be said, and people need to keep in mind, is to protect our freedom. And if we want to use that freedom to go out and buy a house, that's great. But as soon as government gets into the mix, all it does is completely distort the market and lead to, a housing crisis, which some people may or may not remember.
Our cold-hearted, cruel neighbors to the north, the Canadians, don't have any of these federal housing agencies, right? They're very limited.
And they have no homes.
Just igloos?
Yeah, and they live out on the streets, right? Just in the fields.
It's a savage,
it's a savage,
nasty, brutish, and short.
Savage country up there north in Canada, where they don't have any of these housing agencies screwing things up. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. For Don and Terry, I'm Alan Barton. You've been watching Front Page.